Hello, I'm David Goldsmith, and welcome to Project Moonhat. What we're going to be doing today is walking you through the project, and in doing so, hopefully answer some of the questions that you might have. Potentially, you're going to be opening up doors to new questions that we'll have to answer. But before we start, I'd like to share with you one thing. Sometimes I speak very fast. The reason is we have to compress all the materials that we've collected for you so that we can get through it in a timely manner. If it's too fast for you, you can always use the technology to slow this down, but the majority of people can follow me fairly easily. So let's get started. Have you ever considered what it would take to reshape the world? I mean, honestly do it, not just tweak it or improve it slightly, but fundamentally alter its trajectory. It's not going to be as simple as one idea or one action. It's an interconnected set of conditions, decisions, innovations that have to change how we build and survive or thrive for the different future. At some point, let's be honest, we're going to get to that point. We're going to say it's complicated. The changes or the challenges we're facing are not isolated. Every decision we make, every step we take, the systems we have to address from economic to societal shifts all create or need to have an understanding of the interconnectedness. And if you can get around your mind around that, that's how you create real lasting change. So this word that you're seeing, the interconnectedness, I want you to think about it through the entire time we're together. I want you to think about how everything we do has an interconnectedness. And that on a global, worldwide basis, I want you to think about it from this perspective, that what happens in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, China, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Mexico, South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Germany, France, the UK, Russia, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, the US, Canada, wherever you are in the world, there are societal changes that need to happen. We're talking social, political, economic, religious, technological changes, and it touches every corner of the globe, and they influence every plan that we might generate. So to create truly meaningful change, we must embrace this interconnectedness. No challenge, no solution stands alone. So in order to do that, we need to start by changing your perspective. We have three different concepts that I'd like to bring together for you that I think will help you to understand a lot more of our project. And so we're going to work them through first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shift over to the activities we're engaged in. So let's start with this first one. I'd like you to take your age and add 40 years to it. You've got that number? Now, I want you to think about what the world will really be like. Most individuals don't spend the time thinking about that. It's kind of an assumptiveness. Ask yourself what's going to happen. And there's two different extremes here. You can go to the positive, optimistic side or the pessimistic side. We're going to walk through both of them. So imagine that you might be thinking that in the next 40 years, you'll see flying cars and robots in our home, taking care of groceries, going shopping, cleaning our house, walking our dog. Well, that's very optimistic. But by the way, I don't know about you, I've never seen a flying car. I woke up in a bed, there are sheets on it. I did that when I was a boy. There's a toilet in the bathroom, used that when I was a boy. There are no ray beams in my shower, and my microwave is heated with 1945 technology. That was actually a storyline in a cartoon series called The Jetsons in 1962, 1963. I don't know how close we are to that today, but that would be up for you to judge. Now, if we go to the pessimistic side, there are some real shocking numbers out there that will probably make a difference in the way you think. It's believed that 30% of individuals under the age of 30 believe there's no future in the future. I'd like you to imagine for a moment, profit, nonprofit, government, military, education, it doesn't matter, that 30% of the individuals in your organization don't believe there's a future in the future of that organization. If you have 10 employees, that is 3. 3 out of 10 is incredible. If you have 1,000, that's 300. If they don't believe there's a future, it's very difficult to move forward. So let me give you 4 examples of stories that have happened, and maybe you will be able to internalize what's happening here. Was on a call with a 32-year-old just recently, and we were talking about the future. And I said, what do you think the next? She just burst out, what's your timeline? And I said, anything you'd like it to be. She looks up, she looks back into the camera and says, I believe in 50 years, all humanity will be dead. Oh my God. Like, I didn't even know where to start from that belief system. That's a terrible place to live. I was at a restaurant sitting next to this individual, and she leans over to me and she says, I have 10 and 12-year-old girls. I tell them every single morning, never have children. It's a terrible world. Is that a way to raise children? We have a 51-year-old on our team. He has an 8-year-old boy. And during one of our early conversations, he said, I believe in 10 years with robotics and artificial intelligence that humans will be delegated to a second class. Wow. And then there's this individual out of Singapore on stage all the time talking about ESGs, SDGs, very active, has put a lot of money into it. And when we were done with this story that I'm sharing you, I'm giving it to you now, she looks in the camera and she says something to the effect of, thank you, in a way that kind of, when something's wrong, you have to ask. And I said, are you okay? She said, David, I've invested all over the world. I'm helping investors. I'm on stage. I'm moving things forward. Nothing is working. Nothing is making a dent. She said, I have 4 children and I am terrified of their future. Wow. Now, I don't know if you've realized that, but the 4 individuals that I gave you are not under the age of 30. Imagine what's percolating underneath around the world of how individuals are thinking. So let's take this construct and add something to it. If you have children, I want you to think about their next 40 years. Add 40 years to their age. And if you hadn't realized that most people don't, that your children are now older than you are today. In most cases, it's not everyone. Now, if you don't have children, you could use cousins or friends, but in that next 40 years, what you think their lives will be like. Now, if you then take it one step further, your children could have children. Those are grandchildren. And what is their 40 years going to be like? And your children's children could have children. That's only in a span of 40 years. Do the math. Figure it out. It's not far. And yet, this is our timeline that we're working on. See, we have a project that ends in 2063. It will be 40 years at the time in which we've started our counting. We're not about 50 years. We're not about 100 years. We're not about 5,000 or 500 years. That's not our number. And so we're an Earth-focused project on this timeline. Just so you know a little bit about me, I'm not a space person. I don't wake up in the morning looking at the stars. I like green grass. I like going outside. Kind of been brought into this and making this work with an amazing team around the world. Yet I will share with you this one individual we got on the call. We talked about what's the timeline, and he said, David, I manifest for God for the next 500 years. And I didn't even know where to go with that. And later my wife pulled me aside and she said, you do know that God's supposed to manifest for you and you don't manifest for God. Didn't get the memo. I just want you to realize that it is the next 40 years, which is our focus. You might have other timelines that you're working on. That is ours. So let's take another jump here, another one of those perspective changes that need to happen. You might not have realized this, but the world runs on frontier-driven innovations. If there's behind me, you'll see there's a list. These are innovations that have happened, but we're going to go through the series of the 8 right in front of you. See, when a firefighter runs into the building, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but that firefighter who's wearing that outfit, that is space technology. The tank on the back is space technology used for acetylene and for hospitals. The glasses I'm wearing, about 10 years ago, I had to get glasses. That's just what happens when you get a little bit older. At least for me, it did. And that was an experiment gone wrong at NASA for water filtration. I don't know when you think of this morning, when you picked up your phone, when you looked at it, did you say to yourself, oh, that's space technology, the weather that I'm seeing? Or you probably just thought, oh, that's the weather. You probably didn't think about the fact that there are people all around the world using the GPS that they've got. And that GPS moves your foods, products, and services everywhere. So people all over the world can have what they need, whether it be parts or finished products. And most individuals, I didn't know this, that little thing on the back, that camera phone is space technology used to look at plants or your skin or to scan a barcode. All of that is space technology. Water purification, air filtration, cloud computing is space technology. Do you have anybody in the world who's taken that friends of yours or relatives that's had an MRI or a CAT scan? Well, that has embedded in it space technology. But don't think about just the people you know, people who might have solved something, fixed something, worked on something. The fact that I can wear glasses is all part of that because there are other people giving prescriptions or we're doing surgery. All of these are embedded in our lives. When you get on a plane and they de-ice the plane, that de-icing is space technology. And every single pair of athletic shoes came from the origination of space technology. Now, that's important because it's more than we realize There's even more behind me. There's a whole list of them. If you want to stop the screen and look at them, there are so many. We have 2,400 innovations on file in our database. But I'm going to give you just one. In 1961, Black & Decker and Martin Marietta were approached by NASA, and they said, and this is a joke, we can't run an extension cord up into space and to the moon. Can you create a cordless power tool? And they worked on it. They created the first cordless drill. That is the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of all cordless products that exist today, that allow for our plumbing to work and our electrical work and our cars to work. It allows us for homes to be built and repairs to be done. It's embedded in our everyday life, and that came about because of the innovations that were created for Beyond Earth. Now, here's the real question, another one of those paradigm-shifting thinkings. I want you to think about, there's only been 680 some odd people above Earth's atmosphere at any in history, a total of about 900, because some of these people have gone up multiple times. But how can all these innovations that more or less run our lives, how could they have come from beyond Earth? How could that have happened? Well, it fundamentally makes a lot of sense when you break it down. See, we wake up every morning, we put our feet on the ground. We know there's a ground there. We know there's gravity. We know how things work, and we make assumptions. We get into a car. We know how our tires are going to work. We are lifting something, and we know the weight that's involved in it. By having this structure, we make assumptions about all the challenges we solve. And by having them, we kind of track ourselves into solutions that are often very similar than others. But yet, if you're working on Beyond Earth, for millions of people who were working on getting those 600, 700, 800 individual timelines up into Beyond Earth, they had to ask themselves very different set of conditions. So what they did is they looked at it and said, well, it's extremely cold, minus 133 C or 207 degrees Fahrenheit. It's extremely hot, 122 or 251. There's no atmosphere, there's no water, there's gravitational differences, there's a lack of resources, there's radiation exposure, there's communications delays, even material fatigues itself because of the conditions that it's in. So all of these conditions, they have a different set of parameters they have to work on. And here's the fundamental shift, is that when you ask different questions, you generate different answers. And if you can Project Moon, what it fundamentally does at its baseline is ask a whole new set of questions. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about this? How many innovations have we created in space? Inventions, innovations, and discovery are the three categories. Now, I've asked this question of a lot of individuals. You're not in front of me. I wish you were so that I could talk to you directly. But individuals have come up with answers going up as high as, hundreds of thousands. Now, you could see their faces trying to figure out how many, but I'm going to give you a simple answer, and I think you're going to get it. See, we haven't developed we don't create innovations in space. The millions of dollars that are spent for us to go to Beyond Earth create innovations on Earth. See, what we do in space is we discover. Now, somebody in the Beyond Earth ecosystem could say, David, we have innovated in space. Well, yes, but in relative terms, every single day there's innovations going on Earth with 8 billion people. So therefore, if there was an innovation discovered beyond Earth, in relative terms, it's a zero number. And so if we take it from that perspective, it really changes how we think. So let me give you an example so you can get your mind around all of this. The International Space Station is a platform, not a creator for innovation. And this is what happens. Let's say in February 2026, we've been given the rights to be on the International Space Station or something being done on the Tiangong, that we would then say, okay, we're going to bring a group of people together. We're going to create new tools and new processes. We're going to assemble it in all different conditions. We're going to run these experiments on Earth over and over and over again. At one point, we're going to take the box. We're going to send it up to the International Space Station. They're going to unpack it. They're going to take out the camera or the sensors, just like the person behind me is doing. And what they're going to do is record all the data that comes off of it and see there's discoveries that happen beyond Earth. Then they're going to send the results back down to Earth, and then individuals are going to innovate with that data. If you look at it from this perspective, it changes everything. Space is where we run the experiments. It's not where the innovations are happening. And that's a huge mind shift. But let me add to that. I just gave you tons of examples of innovations. I'm going to make that even worse in terms of numbers or better, depending on your perspective. There's an individual by the name of Gadahar Reddy who was working on water filtration for Mars. His parents put up $10,000 $10,000, and they built a company about creating and solving for this challenge. And what he came up with was a nanotechnology where he created almost like a straw, but lined them up. And what would happen is water molecules could fit through the straw, but the dirty water could not. He worked on this, I think, for a decade, and he solved it. He has solved water filtration on Mars. But what happened? What was his biggest challenge? We're not on Mars. We're not on Mars. So what did he do? He didn't tell his employees, oh, you disappear, we're just going to close up shop. What he did is he pivoted. It's now being used in biomarkers for medicine. It's being used in super dark coatings under planes. It's being used for water filtration. So those will never be considered space technology because they've never used beyond Earth, even though the fundamental thinking came from that. So that's another innovation. And you could think about how many of these have happened. I'll give you another one. Jonathan and I were on the line from a company called Helios. He's out of Israel. They're working on refueling for Mars, for the moon. Great conversation. At one point, he starts to share with me a story. What they needed was to do this experiment, and they needed a kiln, K-I-L-N. They needed a kiln to heat up the experiment to 1200 C. So they bought a used kiln. They took that kiln and they started to do the experiment, and something didn't go exactly what they planned on. And they got 10 times the amount of iron ore off the back end of it. And he more or less, he said, we created metal. And yes, they did. In a factory environment, they're able to create metal. I don't know if you know this, that's 6% of the global emissions. We have to ship metal around the world. So there's a lot of challenges with the way we produce metal. He said, yes, it is. It is. And then what we've done is we've taken it from 1200 C to 270 C. And he said, we've patented and we're moving that forward. And I said, so you invented metal? And he said, yes, I did. Yes, we did. And I said to him, no, you didn't. And he looked at me with this odd look, like, what are you saying? And I said, you were working on a space experiment that went horribly wrong in terms of the way the experiment was supposed to happen. And in doing so, you came up with this new material. And what you've created is what will be called distributed localized manufacturing, where you could do manufacturing outside of the city that would work, but it still was a space experiment. And what I'm going to tell you is your future. You're going to, in a few months, your website's going to change. And on top, it's going to have this thing about metals, which it did, and space will fall to the backside. And in the future, 20 or 30 years from now, they're going to say Helios created this way to do metals in factories. But the reality was, by thinking differently, they created new innovations, and those new innovations allowed them to create something that was fundamentally different than what we've ever had. That's amazing. It's powerful, but it was because they were thinking of those harsh conditions and trying to solve for them. So why are these points important? It's because when you're trying to solve or address what we're looking to address in Project Moon Hut, we're leveraging a counterintuitive approach to addressing, adapting, and evolving to meet these challenges. So just for a minute, I want you to imagine what we're working through and remember that interconnectedness of everything. So you have to also assume that we're builders, we're innovators and collaborators. What we're doing, and this is our directive within Project Moon Hut, and I'm going to go over each one of the 5 points separately, but I'm going to say it at one point so you can hear it all together. We're establishing a box with a roof and a door on the moon through the accelerated development of an Earth and moon-based ecosystem, then turning the innovations and the paradigm-shifting thinking from that endeavor back on Earth to improve how we live on Earth for all species. So let's take the first one, which is establish a box with a roof and a door on the moon. What does that mean? So you need a little bit of history to understand the context of this, where it all began, and the story behind Project Moon Hut. Through a series of events, there's a video on this. I'm not going to go over all the details, but I found myself at NASA multiple times. And on the 10th hour, I was sitting in a restaurant with one of the individuals from NASA, and he's describing all the challenges that he had. And at one point I said, I can solve this. And he knew my background. My background is I've worked with the CEOs of companies from Maersk, Dole, Tektronix, Infosys, Wipro, Illinois Toolworks, around the world in different categories. I've owned over 20 businesses, worked in all different industries. And I don't say that to boast, from nanotechnology, aerospace, water and sewage, construction, retail. I say it so to give context. So I looked at him and he was shocked. And I told him to lean forward and I gave him an answer and he looked at me. Now, I then proceeded to say, would you like to know how to get to the moon? And he kind of hesitantly said, yeah. And I said, what we have to start out with is a box with a roof on the moon. And in my mind, I was thinking of a home, but I didn't say it out loud. I said, you need a box with a roof, which is phase one. A few people go up. There could be deaths along the way. I apologize. That's what's going to happen. And then we have to put this box with the roof on the moon. The second is we have to go to an industrial park. We have to sell something from the moon to the earth and the earth to the moon. That is what's happened throughout history. The next is extended stay, and the following is community. And I gave him an evolutionary timeline. This went over an hour and a half. And so this box as we're leaving the restaurant, he looks at me and he says, David, we don't need a box with the roof. And you know that feeling like, you spend all that time and didn't get it? He said, we need a box with a roof and a door, a home. And it was like, oh my God, he got it. He understood the concept behind it, that we're not about settlement colonization. Those are terrible words around the world. And we're not about space science, research, and exploration. Leave that to NASA, the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, South African Space Agency. Let's leave that to Roscosmos. That's okay. That's for them. But if we're going to fundamentally change the future, we have to have this 4-phase development. So again, we are our purposes, we're creating Earth-driven solutions. And then fast forward even more, about 2 years later, we met with NASA every single month for 5 years. And then in the second year, we were in a meeting. Again, there's a story to this, not going to go into the details, but one of the individuals named us Project Moon Hut. If you get it, it's a project. We are a project. The 4 phases in development and what's necessary. And we are a moon hut. A hut is like a home. So John Hafer, one of the artists that had long ago in one of the businesses we had, I called him and said, can you draw some diagrams of it? So these are the first images that were ever drawn, Moon Sweet Home. And then on the right, if you take a quick look at it, you'll see there's a McDonald's symbol there. There's even a dog walking across the surface. So kind of cute, but it gave that messaging. So what we've got is we've developed a 4-phase, and that 4 phases still we're working on today over 40 years. We will have 8 people, 90 people, 578, 1,644. That's our number. Now, to give you a set of context, we've never had more than 19 people above Earth's atmosphere at any given time at once. So when someone talks about, and just had someone recently say they're going to have 700 people in what's called a Van Braun wheel spinning in space, going up for tourism every month in the next 4 years. We have people who say they're going to be 50,000 people in like a straw cylinder that's a mile wide or a kilometer wide, where they could spin and have gravity within the next 10 years. We have individuals who are sharing all sorts of stories. That's great. Let them work on it. But ours is 890, 578, 1,644 over 40 years. We think it's pragmatic. We also believe it works. And I'll share with you what other people do think too. So what we've done from that is, and thankfully, if you want to say for the COVID situation, I'd lived in Hong Kong for over a decade. And what happened was I got stuck here because of COVID. And an individual that I had spoken to ask to be on a podcast series, he had declined at the time. He called up and he said, why haven't you called or returned on my calls? Well, it was going to, our emails was going to spam. And we started working together. We spent about 8 months working on 2-dimensional diagrams for the development of the moon. And I will tell you, they're so in-depth and so detailed that one of the individuals who runs a very prominent company looked at the designs and just, he got to a point where he said to himself under his breath, wow, this is big. This is really big. He says, we're in. So we have 2-dimensional diagrams that are very well defined. We have at one point, Andreas is his name, out of Germany. He's done probably more parabolic flights than almost anybody on the planet. That's where you do the 0G. At one point, he made a comment. He said, we should go old school. I meant not just draw diagrams. He said, we should go old school and figure this out and get models made. So for 3 months, search for the #1 model association in the world. We ended up speaking for them. And one individual, Glenn, called us afterwards and said, I would like to donate my time and help build these scale models. We have 2-dimensional. We have our phase 1 took 3,000 hours and 8 months to produce. Our phase 2 took 18 months and 10,000 hours working on it. So we've been doing the real back end hard work that's necessary to make that happen. Now, having a scale modeler is fantastic because it's kind of one of those things things, when you draw a picture, you could just draw a picture. But when you have to address the questions, the real questions, and the scale modeler says, I don't see how this works together. And we had to readdress and formulate better solutions to the challenges we have. We're also working on three-dimensional diagrams and engineering. We have multiple papers written. We have, again, a total of 24 months of scale modeling, design copyrights. We've done the homework to make this so that it can come to life. Now, before you start thinking, because you could fall into this trap, oh, not another space project, I want you to rethink everything that you think. So let's start with this construct. Space is not an industry, it's a geography. There is no space industry. And because they have this fundamental belief, the people within it, it actually is limiting for moving forward. So let me share with you an approach, and I think you'll get it. See, there is no water industry. There is no land industry. There is no air industry. And I'll move myself out of the way for a moment. And there is no space industry. Those industries don't exist. See, what we have is in the water industry, we have boating and fishing and travel and freight. Those are industries, logistics. But when we go to the land industry, we call it construction or road maintenance or retail or forestry or agriculture. If we skipped over to the air, it's on air industry. We call it drones, aviation, weather monitoring, air freight. Those are industries. And if we did the same thing for beyond Earth, we have logistics, communication, satellite imagery, tourism, and the last one on the bottom there, we have life support. So I'm going to take the life support and I'm going to dimensionalize it a little bit for you. Maybe this will help. See, life support underwater is different than on the air, the International Space Station, the Moon, or Mars. So if you're in a submarine, you have one type of life support. That's the life support industry. Then you have life support in a hospital, life support in an airplane. Life support in the International Space Station, Moon, and Mars are completely different than one another. It's the geography that determines the type of life support. So by doing that, we end up expanding the ecosystem. So let's drive that home a little bit more. Let's imagine that I build bolts and I come to you and I say, and you're in the automotive industry, and I say to you, I've been working hard and I've made this bolt. It's an amazing bolt. We produce 17,000 bolts, but we produce a specialty bolt that doesn't shear at a certain strength. And we know that you've been having challenges with your vehicle. You would say, oh my God, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you've done that. See, I want to order 2 million of those, and you are now part of our supply chain and you're part of our ecosystem. You're building bolts. That's fantastic. Thank you for the work. But the Beyond Earth ecosystem doesn't do that. And this is exclusionary. They will say, if you do the same thing, I've created this bolt that has heat resistant and it has a corrosion resistance, what you would need for Beyond Earth. And you say, this is the bolt. I produce 17,000 bolts, but we made this for you. They would say, wow, thank you. By the way, do you love space? You say, no, I don't love space. I love bolts. Bolts are great. And they'd say, see, you're a vendor. And you're not part of that ecosystem. And because of that exclusionary principle, and it happens all the time, they have a different language. It's very difficult to break into it because it's about loving space. No, it's about ecosystems and industry. And imagine if they would open their minds to a new possibility. Project Moonhot is changing that. We're having conversations with individuals who are now starting to get that. We need to be larger because a major corporation can work on something small in a certain area and still be part of the Beyond Earth ecosystem. But the other thing you're probably going to be thinking about is we're building on the moon. Change that perspective also. If you were to build something on Earth, we typically call it, when it's a large-scale project, we call it an infrastructure project. So if I said to you, we're going to build in the Sahara Desert some structure, I wouldn't call it a Sahara project or industry. I'd call it a construction project. If I was going to build in the middle of the rainforest, I don't call it a rainforest industry. I would call it a construction project. Same thing in Antarctica. Now, if you were to build at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, it would be similar, or on the moon. However, it would be more difficult to build at the bottom of the Marianas Trench than it would be on the moon. So we are an expansion from Earth. We're on Earth and we're expanding out like the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. We're going out and we're building and we're expanding the Earth's ecosystem to have a location on the moon. And that is what we're building. We're an infrastructure project. There's a distance, there's capacity that need to be done, and the challenge we need to face in that new harsh environment and solving for that. So we've had many people look at our designs. The word many is a relative term. We've had a decent amount of people look at our designs. And Dan Dumbacher, the executive director of the American Institute for Astronautics and Avionics, who's been on our team, has said, there's no story out there that ties together with all the activities that need to be done on Earth. Grant Anderson, the #1 life support company in the world, said there's nothing out there that's similar. We had an individual from and we've had multiple people from the Space Force who have taken a look at what we're working on. And one individual said, I've seen every project that happens on this planet. You have the most in-depth and detailed project of anybody, anywhere that's been generated. And I'll share with you right above me, there's Andy Aldrin. And this is an interesting story. Andy's a great guy. On our first call that we had this conversation. We got on the call and Andy and I go at it. We are just bouncing heads across, banging heads with one another. See, Andy has 325 graduate students in 500 schools around the world who are working on Beyond Earth. And we're having these conversations, and I don't know nearly as much as he does. So he's really hitting me hard. And at the end of the conversation, I looked at him and I said, so when do you want to meet again? And he said, this was a terrible call. Why would we want to meet again? And I said, well, if I could speak to you, I could speak to anybody. And what ended up happening was we agreed to talk, and we spoke every 2 weeks for about 8 months until December 2022. And we were having a conversation about Beyond Earth. And at one point, Andy kind of stopped. And you know the situation where you could see someone's thinking. I'm going to relate it to, he kind of tilts your head. You could, like a puppy dog. He was, and I don't call him a puppy dog, but tilts his head and he's thinking. And I froze like a rabbit. I did not want him to stop thinking. And he looks into the camera and he says, where do we go from here? Now I'm going to come back to Andy because it's very important, the paradigm shifting that came out of this. By the way, we also are working on a new transport vehicle that changed the economics of travel. And Hans Koenigsmann, after he heard he was the #4 hire from SpaceX, his words were, I don't think SpaceX is thinking as big as Project Moonhut is. So we've had the individual from Germany ran an organization called Space Affairs. We've had McKinsey's on our team for over 3 years. The head of that unit is working with us. We've had orbital mechanics companies working with us, scale modelers, and all sorts of individuals helping us to move this forward. So let's get on to the second one. There's a lot here, and that's why I'm speaking quickly. Through the accelerated development of an Earth and Moon-based ecosystem. So let's take that shift. Remember, the interconnectedness of everything. We need to unlock the power of connective thinking. There are primarily 3 things that need to change to create lasting change, at least in the human side. We have to have alliance development. We have to be able to get together and create alliances to make things happen. Humans need that. But we also needed a community engagement, but not like community like all kumbaya, we all get together. But we need to be able to bring libraries and videos and technology and research and schools all together so that we learn and grow. But another part of that stool that allows us to be able to live and thrive is the governance models that we develop. So we have to have all 3 of them to work. So what we're doing is we're merging cutting edge technologies to be able to create this collaboration. We're using computational cell science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, network analysis, learning management systems, large learning language models, rating systems, and so much more to bring together a way in which we can collaborate like we've never done before. But to give you a reference point to get you to be thinking differently, when you think of LinkedIn, what is your routine? And I can guarantee you do what everybody else does. You connect to people, you like posts, you post something of your own, you might comment, you might read something, you watch something, and that's the activity. I have 18,000 people that I don't know who are connected to me, and people will often say, David, I just wanted to be connected. Well, that's playing by the old rules. We have to change the rules. And part of that rule is the way in which we build the structure of this platform we're putting together. So think about it in this way. When you go to LinkedIn, you might not know this. It's basically a job placement structuring. It's your CV. That's what it is. Your CV so you can meet other people. It's not about the organization. It's not about the problem solving or decision making. It's about connecting. If you go to Google, they want to sell you products and services off of Google. They want your data to sell you something. And OpenAI is about subscription and securing your data. So behind every platform, there's a product they're selling, and often that product is you. We want to change that. We want to bring together the scattered sense of how we work together and enable better decision making. So we're tying together a bunch of activities that you do every single day already when you want to create different decisions or make any decision. So you might go to LinkedIn to get the data on individuals. By the way, we have 800 million names ready for the platform that we can input in terms of profiles. The Palantir does analysis of data. Crunchbase gives you, well, how much has the company earned? How much have they been funded? Behind me is Yelp, which is a rating system. We also have the Alibaba, for example. What products do people offer? Most of the time, I have no clue what someone's meeting me, what they offer in their everyday lives. There's news, there's media, there's learning. What if we can compress all these together and a lot more? So what we've done is we have filed a 420-page provisional. We have 23 hours of videos. We have papers that have been filed, all to bring this to life. And we have amazing people working on this. So I'll give you just one example of how powerful this can be. Just one example. This is and there are many more. I'd like you to imagine that you're sitting inside of a network and you could see it. Let's take any type of application and you could see who you are. Imagine if you could look around at all the people that you're connected with on LinkedIn or any application and see into their network. What's their industry, how they're connected, what do those networks combine? And imagine if you could, what would happen if you could accelerate that? So I'll give you an example. I'm in Las Vegas at one point speaking at a conference, and I run into this guy, Dave, and we become good friends. He lives in San Diego, and I happen to be living in Hong Kong at the time. We have a great time talking. Over months, we're starting to work together. We've started a business together. And at one point he gives a call and gives me a call and says, is this your mother's name? And I said, yes, that's my mother's name. Now I have no clue how he would know that. And in the background I hear in an Eastern European accent, is his father's name? And I say, are you going to ask me what my father's name is? And I say, yeah, that is my father's name. He said, you won't believe this. My mom and your mom went to elementary school together, and my mom was at your parents' house 3 weeks ago. Imagine if we could see those networks, how we tie things together. You're going to work on a deal with somebody, and the person knows a friend of yours, has known them for 10 years. What would that change if you were able to get that credibility? What if we can create those networks so people can collaborate faster? What if we could do that worldwide? So we have an initiative to help that we want to touch 1 billion hearts and minds. There's a data point that if you could take 30%, 20% of a population and get them to think about something in a similar way, you can get that traction, move things forward. So what if we were able to do that? Well, there's 8 billion people on this planet. So that would be 20% would be 1.6 billion. Not a great number. So we figured if we can get 1 billion hearts and minds to be rethinking about the future with Project Moon Hut, what a different world we would have today. So we're going to be leveraging the tools that we are developing. And I'm going to give you one example of them. So when I was done presenting and I told you about Scratch Restaurant and telling about the 4 phases, at the end of telling about the 4, he said, well, who's going to pay for this? And I said, everybody and nobody. And he looked at me kind of confused. And I said, what we want to do is we want to get individuals to connect, and we all participate on a global scale to establish the 4 phases. And he didn't get it until about 6 months later. He came back and he said, well, that's called Stone Soup. Well, there is a parable called Stone Soup where 2 individuals are walking into a town. They're hungry as can be. They have no money. And this individual says, I'll be able to get some food. And he says, how are you going to do that? And he said, watch. So he walks up to a door, knocks on it, and he says, can I borrow a big pot? And the woman says, why do you want to borrow a pot? Says, well, I want to make stone soup. And the woman says, stone soup? Never heard of that. It's delicious. You should have some of this. So the woman gives him a pot, nothing to lose. And he takes the pot, goes down to the stream, pulls some water out, and he puts it in the center of town and puts some wood under it and starts the fire. And as it starts to boil, he takes out some stones in a bag and a rag and drops them in. And a little while later, he takes a sip. And someone in the village, who is now a whole crowd has formed, says, how is it? How is it? And he says, it's good, but needs a little bit of salt. The guy says, I have some salt, takes it out of his pocket and dumps some in. He says, how is it now? It's a little better, but maybe some carrots. Well, one of the individuals had been going by, says, I've got some carrots. They were in his bag. He takes out some carrots and throws it in. And next thing, someone throws some potatoes and some meat and some all different types of spices. And before you know it, they fed the village. Well, that's kind of the construct under Project Moon Hut. We're not going to try to do everything. We need to bring the ecosystems together. And in this case, while I was sitting in Scratch Restaurant, we were talking about how do you build this with this everybody and nobody. And I said, well, let's take Caterpillar. And let's say I'm assuming that Caterpillar wants to build on the moon and do mining on the moon. And he said, yeah, they do. They really do. And I said, well, what you're sharing with me is that not that they want to do it on the moon, is that they're looking to do remote mining, which also is a dual use technology, which could be used on Earth. And he said, yeah, that's exactly that. I said, but the challenge is if they had to put up $10 billion to build this ecosystem by themselves, they couldn't do it. But what if we can help them to find, using this concept of stone soup, what if we can help them find 10 customers? And what if those customers would buy some of the products or spin-offs that they have? And what if we can help those find 10? What we do is we minimize risk. Now, at the time, I had a partner in a company in South Africa. We did computational social science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the things I spoke about earlier. So this network analysis and these possibilities all came to life. And he had never thought about it that way, because it's always NASA builds it or European Space Agency builds it, or we form these little coalitions. But what if we just change the world fundamentally was part of the construct that was shared? So let's give you some of the members of this team. Give an example. If you've ever gotten a text message from Amazon that says that your package has arrived, well, the guy who came up with that built that for all of Amazon's on our team. Paul Allen, Bill Gates' partner, had a project management person in his team. He's on our team helping us to build. The number one ontologist in the world has been on our team. And if you don't know what ontology is, language on software has to talk with each other. So if you have different language, it's tougher for it to communicate. So if you have a car, a vehicle, and an automobile, there has to be a translator in between them. But if you come up with a structure that they all would follow, it would make things easier. On this little chart you're seeing, on the one side where it's very dense, that is what he's done in the medical biology space. And on the other side, these networks are looser, which means that they can't communicate as effectively using tech. And then we have the number one of the top computational social science and artificial intelligence people on our team. So let's jump to the next one. Then we turn those innovations back on Earth. Well, we have a team of individuals who is working on the cross-pollination of innovation, making it go faster. So imagine if, let's use Mercedes or Toyota or Ford is working on new engine part, and they come up with something. What they typically do is they then patent it and then hold it. But what if we can accelerate that movement to someplace else? Well, that's what their job is. And one of the data points that might be useful to you is 97.2% of patents never make it. They're just terrible. The others are not funded, and the rest are sitting in vaults. So out of all the patents out there, very few actually get to market. What if we were to bridge these ecosystems and these innovations worldwide to create that collaboration? And that's what this team is about. That's what we're working on. Now, to say that team, that's all they're working on, we spent over a year and a half figuring out our model, which is maybe even 2 years, on the model that's on the left, where our sources come from, the activities we're going to get engaged in to make that happen. Then we're looking at the products and combining them. You might not know this. This is a new thing for me in the past decade. There's something called a patent pool. This is where a certain group of individuals get together and put all of the innovations they can together so that if you're looking to get a patent, you can go to this pool and be able to find it. So one of the largest in the world is for the telecommunications for your mobile phone. So instead of having to search through hundreds and hundreds or thousands of innovations, you go to this patent pool and you pick out what you'd like, and you can get the licensing done through it. We're going to call it a patent library a little bit differently because we want to go across multiple different ecosystems. And then we have use cases of where it will go. It's going to go within the Project Moonhot ecosystem. It's going to go out to the Beyond Earth ecosystem. Industry that is not connected, but some of those innovations are going to need further work and development, and others are going to need funding. So that's our model that we're developing. But we also, at the same time, are looking for systems for transparency. So we've been working on a blockchain solution as well as application where the innovations, we can track them and be able to see what the impact is. So one of the individuals who helped launch Ethereum is on our team, and we have 17 law firms worldwide who are doing office actions. We have individuals who are involved in all sorts of patents, trademarks, and copyrights. So in this one space, I'm going to give you one map. There are tons of maps out there that we've developed, but this is just one. So you can get a sense that we're looking for this and to understand how we're developing. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the United States. But in order to raise the capital, and to give you a construct for the map, in order to raise the capital that's necessary, we're a $1.6 trillion project over 40 years, we had to go to people who understood capital markets. And we were helped by individuals in Wall Street and others to help us to take a look at how we might be able to structure this. So we created a structure that we brought, excuse me, we went to KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, and EY. Some of them spent over 3 months working on this to find out if this could be done right and if it's proper. They came back and said yes. And as a matter of fact, one of the individuals on that team at our last call said to us, "This is the most exciting project I've ever heard in the entire 21 years I've been at the organization." So we've set up in the Cayman Islands. So you'll see there's United States office that would be for all the patents and trademarks in the United States. There's the Cayman Islands, so we pay taxes where taxes are due. We want to pay them wherever, and we're open in many regards in that to be able to move that forward. Talking with our experts on our team, one of them said that, or not, they all agreed that we needed to set up in Europe to handle filings of patents, trademarks, and copyrights, because it's beneficial to file your trademarks and copyrights in Europe before you file in the United States. That office takes care of EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Asia. Then we're looking to be in Vietnam for the Asia region. Lived in Hong Kong, as I mentioned, for a decade, so that takes care of China. It's a different animal. And then Panama for the Americas. So we're mapping out where we want to expand to and grow. And if any of you are interested in helping us, that's part of what we're building. So we've done this for all different parts of the organization and what we're building. We have hundreds of graphics and papers and designs and people working on real hard work, not just imagery and plans of what needs to be accomplished. So for example, to say in our intellectual property side, we have filed design copyrights phase 1, phase 2, and on. We've filed for our models that have been developed, for our two-dimensional diagrams. We worked on copyrights for trademarks for Project Moon Hut. And our Mirth name, by the way, it took us on our trademark or our Mirth name, it took about 18 months to fight against an organization in France that didn't want us to have that name, and we came to an agreement. We have filed on the Project Moon Hut classification system. We have patents filed on different things that we've developed. You might be asking, why are you filing all these patents? It's because we just want to say, look, don't fight us, join us. You want something that we've got something that you've got, which is the talent and expertise. Join the ecosystem. Instead of being a shotgun going to the moon, why don't we all work together to make something happen as a collective? And I don't say that in any derogatory way, just that we work together in co-opetition to make something move forward. We even have a compliance team. Now, if you don't know what compliance is, it is the transfer of certain information outside of a country. So South Korea has their own compliance program. So does Spain. So does Brazil. They all have them. What is allowed to go cross borders? But the most intensive is the United States. The United States has a very intensive ITAR EAR CFIUS program. And so we were introduced to the Kirkland Ellis team, the largest and most profitable law firm in the world. They heard our project and they said, we want to help you. We're in. And they've been doing amazing work for us as part of our team. They've been with us for over 3.5 years. They're donating their services and they've been, incredible. So we're working on building out a compliance program that allows us, where most organizations would take years to get to this point, we've got what's necessary to fast track what we're working on so that we don't break any laws anywhere around the world. And by working with them, they help us to identify so we don't hit obstacles along the way. So now we've got to get to a big part of this. How do we change how people think? Well, that's a tough one. We have to take that thinking and turn it back on earth. So I'd like you to take a look at this picture. You've got couples and people together and connected. So I'm going to ask you a question and give a serious answer. Have you changed your partner or your spouse? Have you fundamentally, truly changed who they are, or friends? Now, we get two answers. It's always two answers. There's a yes and a no. Sometimes, I'd say there's a quasi. The yes is, oh, I've changed my partner. I've been divorced twice. So they got rid of them because changing a person is hard. But if you go to the other side, people say no. And I've been with my wife for 400 billion years. She would many times like to change me. But we don't change the person fundamentally who they are. We live with those individuals. So how do we change? How do humans change? And we change through experiences. We change through the types of things that go through our lives that make us become different. Whether you got sick or whether you went on a trip, maybe you met a friend and you fundamentally changed. So what if we didn't go out and tell the world to change? That's why you've not heard about us. What if we just did the work? But in this case, we're working on using and leveraging immersive technologies and everyday experiences. So let me give you a narrow scope and then bring it a little bit wider. So there's AR, VR, digital twin, haptics, 3D, 4D gaming toys. There's all sorts of technology that allows us to be immersive. And that's typically what's called immersive technology. However, I'd like to challenge you to think a little bit differently. When you go out to dinner, when you read a book, when you read poetry, when you go to an art exhibit, when you go to a museum, do you get immersed? So immersive could be anything that changes the way people think, act, and play. What if we leverage that in a positive way for tomorrow to build? So what this team is working on and what we're looking at building is we want to take those experiences and convert them. So here, let's say there's a game called Forge of Empires. If you don't know it, it's a very popular game. They have 130 million users in them. What if they were to play a different game called Forge of Mirth? Now, I'm guaranteeing you don't know what mirth is. I'll get to that in a moment. But what if they played a game of Forge of Mirth, building a new future? What if we leverage the mediums that we work with, the videos, the books, the AR, VR, digital twin? What if we took storylines and we leverage them? I can tell you how impactful they are. For example, if I played the music for The Lion King or Star Wars or any of these favorite movies or television shows, Friends, you would know in a heartbeat like that what that comes from. Because it embedded in you. You saw it, you liked it, you engaged with it. Well, imagine if at one point you were to say, well, take us out of mirth. Captain Kirk is standing on the bridge. He says, take us out of mirth. I could see 100 million people picking up their mobile phone and saying, what is a mirth? Well, that would change things. I don't know if you've ever been to another country or learned another language, but when you learn another language, you really fundamentally change because you start to see the way in which individuals look at the world very differently. So what is a mirth? The mirth is the combination of two words, moon and earth. And it represents where we live. It's a 297,000 mile radius around the moon. So it's further out than the moon. And that's where the moon goes around the earth. And we live here. This is our territory. This is our home. It's the moon and earth are the only celestial bodies that really work together to exist the way they do. Pluto does have another celestial body around it, kind of spins like a peanut. But when you look at this is our home. And if we now said, instead of living on Earth, we live within Mirth, it changes a lot of our perspective. So let me give you, so you have a baseline for this. I don't know if you know this, but the Earth stays at its tilt of 27 degrees. It spins because of the moon at the speed that it does. The climates move around because of it. Our waters and our oceans have the tides are changed by it. We have nutrition cycles that are shifted around the moon. I mean, women's biological cycles, animals' biological cycles are tied to it. The growth and influence of flowering and fruit are connected to it. We hunted by the light of the moon. As a matter of fact, timekeeping plays with the moon, as well as books and love. All of this ties together. So what if we looked at our future differently, that we live within Mirth? Now, here's two constructs that will tie, a second one that ties to that. Humans fill space. I love this picture. This little girl, she's filled her space. Now, when you were growing up, did you have a brother or sister or people living in your room that you grew up in? Some of you say yes, some say no. So if it's your room, it's my space. That's my space. Don't touch my space. But if you lived with a brother or sister, you probably say that's your space. This is my space. That's shared space. If you went to university, same thing. Your space, my space, shared space. If you had your first apartment, you didn't buy or rent one 10 times what you needed. You figured out what space you needed and you got one that fit your needs. I can tell you, if you've owned a home, I can see right outside. I know exactly where my property line starts and where it ends. I know those two extremes. Don't touch my space. Don't put the grass on my space. Don't cut my space. Don't touch don't do anything on my space. This is my space. That's your space. We have this sense of humans filling it. And by the way, in my home, we filled it. We filled our space. Even if we put stone or grass, it's still our space, or if we don't touch it. Now, let's jump to another level. Does your community, your town have a space? Yes, you have a border that where the construction crew stops and they don't do any more, or the plow picks up. See, on one side, that's your side. You take care of that. You pay taxes. You service that. On the other side, you don't. So we fill space, but let's even go countrywide. We have airspace that we now occupy. The challenge is we've run out of space. Now, the world hasn't all completely been covered, but if you really to think about a young kid growing up today, or you wanted to go someplace, you want to go to Mount Everest, the top of Mount Everest, take a picture, made it, you're going to see something like this, and you might be online to get a picture taken. If you went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and you want to take a picture with someone you were with, well, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have 3,000 of your best friends standing in the background. We just, not because of the population, it's because these are the places that people go. There's not a lot for people to aspire to, and generations of old had a lot of aspiration. So today, there's two things that you hear a lot. I want to be an influencer. I want to be wealthy. I want to make $1 billion to change the world. Oh, come on. Most of the people who've changed the world didn't have those billions. There were people who just tried to do something different. But we need to give people a new sense of purpose, that future. Where do we build out to? And it's not for everybody. We don't need the whole world to do it. We need enough. So remember that conversation with Andy Aldrin. Well, the next month, Andy calls me while he's traveling up and down the coast of Florida. And he said, David, all I keep thinking about is how do we fill Earth? Exactly. Humans fill space. Not Mars, not Venus, not Jupiter, not Alpha Centauri. Those are very difficult for us to get our mind around. We can't fill it. And if you knew how far these things were, oh my God. I mean, the moon is 3 days away. That's still far. I mean, when I travel to Singapore, or if the longest flight I've ever taken was a total of 56 hours. I had to get from, it was Bangladesh back to the States, I think it was. It took about 56 hours of time. But going to Mars is 9 months of travel. That's not our ecosystem. That's not what we live in. Mirth gives us a geography. That's not to say one day distant galaxies, but Project Moonhunt is about Mirth. It is building within Mirth, getting that, instead of a buckshot, getting us all focused in the Beyond Earth ecosystem to get one thing done. Once we have that happen, it will be like the Roger Bannister who broke the 4-minute mile. They said it was physiologically and psychologically impossible to conquer, to be able to complete it. And he did. And once he did, others did the same. So imagine that we get a box with a roof and a door on the moon, and you wake up in the morning and you have a cup of coffee. Doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be looking up saying, wow, we finally made it. Maybe we should change our investment policies. Maybe we should change policies. You might be thinking about how they would govern on the moon, going back to the platform. You might say, how do we work together differently with individuals around the world? You might even look at humanity as different because now we're on 2 different rocks traveling through space. So I've just skipped over mountaintops. I mean, what I've given so far, and I'm going to go over these very quickly, there's a lot more going on within Project Moonhunt, and there's an interconnectedness. We're always thinking about the paradigm shifting and the innovations, all of those types of functionalities that humans have to rethink. So we are working on fundraising. We want to be put in front of raising funds for a nonprofit. But we also, if you know of anybody where we could be speaking in front of a philanthropic group for the ultra high net worth, the high net worth, the family offices, the individuals who have the capital. There are about 2,700 billionaires in the world today. There's over 10 million ultra high net worth. What if they were able to hear about us and help us to move this project forward? So we're working on fundraising. By the way, fundraising is for nonprofit. Capital raising is for profit. That's often kind of mixed when people say we have a fund. It's actually a capital fund. So then we have a capital raise. We have multiple ecosystems. Those organizations we're talking about are looking to raise money. And we have different types of investment possibilities. Reach out to us because it's really incredible what we're working on. Then we've got Rhapsody, which we're taking. It was just named this. So we're taking a DAO we've been working on. This is our blockchain, crypto, ecosystem of decentralized, and we're working on bringing the world together so that we can manage that ecosystem. And not everything's going to be crypto. It will not. Not everything will be blockchain. There's a mixture of them. But we just had a meeting with a nice chain that really we think is going to bring us on. They're doing a proposal for us, and we're excited about the opportunities with that. So we've had that being worked on. Hope Plus is a program to take a look at what people feel like when they hear about Project Moonot, to help young individuals to start seeing a different future. A little bit of space is to reach out to 5.2 million schools around the world. We have papers on this. We might be starting this very shortly. We've been working on building this as a mechanism to change how we think in our educational system. We're working on artwork. We have a symbol that's Project Moonot and Mirth, and we want to bring those messages, kind of like Batman around the world, just everybody doing the Mirth logo. And how do we make that happen? We're working on an Art Basel project. We want to tie what we're doing to the art world. And Art Basel is one of the largest events with 270,000 people across Hong Kong, Miami, and in Basel, Switzerland. So we're working on an academy for 5th and 6th graders to get them to rethink differently before they get to high school and university or college. So that's being started next month. We have a community that we're developing. There's an individual, he has conferences in 21 cities around the world, and he wants to bring us in as one of the core pieces of what we're working on. He expects to be in 40 by next year. We have 2 podcast series. One of them is called The Age of Infinite, and the other one is called Redefining Tomorrow. I can guarantee you these are the most in-depth interviews you've ever heard about Beyond Earth and The Age of Infinite. They range from about an hour and 20 minutes to 5.5 hours. And we've had some of the top people in the ecosystem. One individual called, said he's listened to every single podcast we've had, and people say on our podcast things they've never said before. Done over 400 podcasts, so here you'll see that there's a nice deep richness there. We have Redefining Tomorrow, covering all different topics from how SRI was working all the way through to how do you change behavior. So there's 2 different podcast series. An organization we're talking to will be creating a promo documentary versus a documentary. A documentary is something that's happened. We have not happened. So it would cover the past, then bring us to the current, and then go to the future. So it's a different structuring. We're looking for 100,000 to be able to build that out. We just found them recently. We've spoken to a bunch of individuals who are excited, but there's an economic challenge to overcome. We're working on a structure that could be in Dubai or Singapore or in Paris, the United States, in LA. We're building a structure. So this story you're going through, and we have all the plans that we're working on this, so that individuals can experience this instead of hearing it through a story. Actually walk through it, where there's AR, VR, digital twin. There's also scale models, and people can get the experiences that happen to understand what's going on. We've also had papers written. A professor from the University of Messina wrote 2 papers on economics. The Mirth Economics, the first 2 ever, which is kind of exciting. The first paper took about 8 months for him to be able to get his mind around it and write that paper. And when we were done, he said, I want to write a second. So he's written 2. Wouter from Amsterdam got on our call. He heard the story and he said, David, I don't even know how to think this big. This is context variation by design on steroids. Well, context variation by design is where you create something as a context so people understand it, and then you put it in another area. So wax on, wax off from the Karate Kid was that same type of analogy. Well, he wrote a paper on context variation by design on steroids. We're working on the new logistics transfer vehicle, which you heard about. We're working on new materials. We have the #1 graphene expert in the world on our team. We're tying rare earth materials to graphene to create superconductive, super reactive, hyper strong materials. There's an individual on the quantum side. She's written over 28 papers. We're taking the quantum in a different angle to help decision-making worldwide. We're working on a university to help people understand the concepts. We have over 125 different videos. You heard about the billion hearts and minds. I'm going to move myself out of the way. We're teaching leadership in a different way so that individuals can learn to lead, manage, and to be highly productive. We even have the #1 mining expert in the world for underwater, on land, high altitude, and the moon on our team. He's built equipment, and we're working this forward to change how we live on Earth and through the moon. And by the way, if you're afraid of mining, every single thing we have in our lives come from some form of mining. Without going into all the pieces, I want you to think about this. Think of any major city in the world. What do they need to be able to thrive or survive? Well, the first thing you'll need is stone, because that's how buildings are made or roads are made. And the second thing people always throw out is steel. So if you look around your desk, everything you have had to be touched by something that was mined. So don't take it in the negative sense. We're changing it. We're reducing to the 1.2 million mines around the world. We're going to be reducing down the toxic spin-offs, that we're going to increase productivity. There will be much safer. So we're working on all of these things. And I've just skipped over mountaintops. I mean, I didn't go into all the details on every one of them, but I want to take you a little bit further, that this is all interconnected by design, that we're changing from linear to dynamic building. Now, what's behind me? We're working on a chatbot, a company out of South Korea called Chatbot. They're working on 4 different chatbot systems. We're about 8 months into that right now. Website design. Go to the website, the second column in. I don't remember the name. You'll see some unbelievably incredible web design. It's actually coding. It's not design. You'll see the 40-year plan. You'll see the Project Moonlight classification system. We have SEO. We're working on branding. We're working on visual storytelling. We're doing research. There's a lot that we're working on. But I want to go back to these 4 different images that you see on here, because I want you to think about how a 40-year plan has to evolve and how we have to think differently as organizations are built. Number one is way we think of an organization. Can I see your org chart? But if people want to get a little bit more complete, they go to the next one, which is, well, we're all kind of working together. Well, that's not how we actually function. If you go to number 3, you're seeing that it's a dynamic intertwining in between. Someone gets fired, someone gets hired, new software is developed, a new product is launched. All of those, and our organizations push and pull based upon how society changes. Social, political, economic changes are happening. But the reality is an organization evolves, it moves, and Project Moonlight moves organically. We're constantly adapting to the inputs that come to us. The world just changed in the past few days, whether with Syria and what's happened in that local conflict. So we've got a lot of changes, and we're adapting continually because our structure is not rigid. It moves with the flow. So you might be saying, well, who's involved with this? Well, we've got KPMG, Deloitte, PwC, EY, Kirkland, Ellis, Maples Group, White & Case, Much, She-List. I mean, we have individuals around the world who are helping us, whether they're giving us products or services or on the team. There have been hundreds of individuals who are helping us to build this out. Can't mention them because there just would be too much on a slide like this. But if you take someone like JP Morgan Private Banking, JP Morgan heard the story, the team at JP, and they said they want to help us. They're on our team, helping us to figure out, navigate things such as donor advised fund or other ways in which we can navigate the future. So we've got an amazing team worldwide that's doing this. So what if we did do this together? What if we tied it all together over the next 40 years and we built it all, just what you've seen so far? Imagine the possibilities. I mean, there's so much that can go on, but then the question begs, why do all of this? This is a lot of work. It's complicated, and we're challenged all the time because the world is changing all the time. So we have to take these endeavors and turn them back on earth. There has to be a purpose for everything we're doing. That interconnectedness has to drive something. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you tell me if you've got an answer. You're not going to be able to say it to me today. Hopefully when I meet you, because you've enjoyed or want to be a part of this, you'll be able to share. But can you identify one initiative that is successfully addressing the critical challenges humanity faces worldwide? Just one. Now, before you completely come up with that answer, I'm going to give you some of them, and you're probably going to say, yeah, I've heard of them. So, for example, the Earthshot Prize, that's a prize given of $50 million over 10 years, $5 million a year, given $1 million to each person, £1 million to each person, to change the world. Well, 50 million pounds, I'm going to probably take a guess that if I went to one of the structures that the royal family has, I could take a wing, and there's more artwork than $50 million just in that one wing. So, I mean, good, great for them. Let's keep that moving. The line is a known project in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia. They're building a 179-kilometer line was their original intention, $500 billion, then $1 trillion, then $1.5 trillion. They have scaled it back to 1.6 kilometers or 7. Don't quote me on that. But they've scaled it back, and they are working to make that happen. We wish them the best of luck. The Natural Conservatory, I don't know if you know this. This was a surprise to me. They have a $1.3 billion budget in 2018. $1.3 billion. And if you kind of summarize them, they're working on mass extinction. They're working on climate change. How are they doing? I mean, let's keep them working on it. But how are they doing in your eyes? So if we take that a step further, I'm familiar with the Paris Climate Accord. We're familiar with the X Prize. We're familiar with the Aspen Institute. All of these we're familiar with. Even very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, here's something, a little guide on why something like this doesn't work, and I think why ours does. Let's take this Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to walk you through this very quickly. It fundamentally can't work, and there's a few reasons for it. First of all, let's start with the word goals. A goal is an end. You can know that you've achieved it, and you can achieve it. So we can set goals that are aspirational, inspirational. There's a saying that came up with years ago called AIMED: aspirational, inspirational, motivational, educational, and directional. In this one case, we have a goal which has got some of those on there through this mist, but it doesn't make sense. If we go over to the first two, no poverty and zero hunger, are we ever going to have that? I mean, I'm hungry right now. I haven't eaten in a few hours. How do we define where hunger sets? But if we were to drop down to life below water and life on land, those are not goals. That's a geography that you want to work within. Or if we go to the next one, climate action and partnerships for the goals, those are actually activities you work on to make the goals work. Here we've got clean water and sanitation. There are two there, and we hope you solve them separately. And if we go to number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, what does that mean? I mean, there are 3 there, and there are also 3 in peace, justice, and strong institutions. How do you work with them? So often people will, I'll make a statement about something that I know this individual does not want, wherever they are in the world. I've worked in over 50 countries around the world. So I'll toss something out that's contrary to what their belief structure, and they'll say, no, that's not what I want. Or you'll hear, we want democracy. And I'll say, it doesn't say that. It says strong institutions. So strong institutions is ambiguous. So what they've done is they've created 169 sub-goals. By the way, they're all supposed to be solved by the year 2030. There's actually 26 on there. I spoke with one of the individuals who helped to create this, and she's pulled me into a room after I spoke with I was at the Austrian embassy in New York City, their structure that they have. And this one woman was speaking, and when she was near the end, she said, we need to focus on the 17 SDGs. And when she walked off stage, I quietly walked up to her and I said, we're never going to hit those 17 SDGs. Never going to happen. And she said, David, we have to give people hope. We have to give people hope. And so let me share with you something. If things change and you find a plan's not working, you change it. So with that said, you might say, well, David, everybody's got to do their part. Someone from the Natural Conservatory said that. And someone else, people have said, well, sometimes things take time, David, before I started keeping track. And about a year ago, a little over about a year and a half ago, I started keeping track of when I shared this with individuals. And I would say to them, have you come up with your answer? And I said, before you do, there are some answers that I have gotten. They're recorded on the bottom here. One person said, Elon will save the world. A woman said, if we got rid of all men, this would all be solved. Another individual said that, or 2 individuals have said that we solved polio together. Another one said we built the internet together. Someone said we COVID together. There's no hiding the offers that came in. But there have been 899 people who have said, can name one. Well, our project is to create that one, and we're building it. And we would love to have you as part of that team, but we're building it. And when they say that, I normally take my cursor, put it over the 899 or 8, whatever number it is, and I add 1. So today you are number 900. And that was not planned. It just happens to be today. You are number 900. But in order then, if we're going to move forward, how do we do this? How do we make this work? Remember, why do all of this above if we don't have an intentionality to it? So we need to change our perspectives here. Now, this might be useful to you for the rest of your life. Humans think in 3s. It's a cognitive ease. We have, we think in memory chunking. We go 694, 392, 241. It makes us easier to remember things when we think of 3s. But we also have 3 little pigs, 3 blind mice. We also, when we look at life, death, birth, life, and death, or we break it down into past, present, and future. Humans think in 3s naturally, and it's a good way to move things forward. So it wasn't intentionally done this way. This was subconsciously. There are 6 mega challenges. Notice it's not a problem. No, it's not a goal. It's a challenge. We will always have climate change. We've always had all of these since the beginning of time. But it's how we address, adapt, and evolve to them that makes a difference. And I'm going to go over, we have climate change, mass extinction, ecosystems collapses. You might say that's spelled wrong. Well, an ecosystem collapses. Ecosystems collapse. But these are ecosystems collapsing over time. It's very different. So it's ecosystems collapses. So we have displacement, unrest, and explosive impact. And I'm going to go over them in detail. But there's one thing I want you to really concentrate on. We don't place blame. Look, there are people in the world with a lot of talent. They've gone in different ways. They've learned their ways. They're learning. What's happening in the world is reshaping them. And so we want everybody on board. And the analogy or a comparison that I give is if you have a family member who needed surgery, and the number one person in the world, the surgeon, is the person you hate more than life itself. This person, you despise them more than anything. And you needed that surgery done to save that person's life. Would you have it done? There's not been a single person who said no. So we have to take the people who work at these organizations that you might not like, other people like. We have to take the individuals that are working in different parts of the world. We need everybody in all parts of the world to help us. And we are finding them. I've worked in over 50 countries, and I can tell you they're amazing people worldwide. So let's keep on bringing them together in a way that they've never been done before to one project to move things forward. So let's give a very fast world tour. It's surprising how many people say afterwards they didn't know all of these things were going on. So we give a world tour for you to get a sense of it. And maybe this will open your mind to new things that are happening around the world, and you'll be better prepared. So first of all, we can't solve climate change. Climate has been changing since the beginning of time. But Antarctica is melting at 4 times the speed that it normally does. The wildfires in Australia, California, or Canada have been devastating. As a matter of fact, the CO2 given off by the forest fires in Canada in 2024 was more than half of all emissions for the United States alone for half of a year. In Vietnam, the fish were boiling. The water was so hot that they were boiling out of the ocean. Last year, we had 12 hurricanes in 10 days. Hong Kong, Libya, Greece, and the United States and others. Bangladesh floods every single year, and it's getting higher. We've seen 56 degree, over 120 degrees for 6 weeks in India. In Saudi Arabia, those who could afford it are going to Turkey because it's so hot during the summers. Spain, they just put an estimate out that by 2050, parts of it will be unlivable. That's because they're having challenges with water. Around the UK and around Florida, they had temperature in the water so hot last year and the year before that it was actually better not to go in the water. It was like a sauna. It was so hot, and animals can't live in that. And Mexico City has 22 million people. They happen to have built on an aquifer. They pulled all the water out, so they shrunk about 50 cm or 20 inches down, and they're running out of water. The Amazon is 90% of its loss of water. Now, that's not to say that we are not going to be able to adapt and evolve to that. So let's take extinction. There's, animals are going extinct. Yes, they have, and they have since the beginning of time. There's an estimate that there have been over 5 billion species on this planet. And if you were to need a comparison, dinosaurs survived 165 million years. Humans are only 300,000 years old. So the planet's going to keep on going well past where we are with new types of species and new adaptability that's going to happen out of it. But let me give you a frame of reference. Today, in our world, the way we know it, 1 out of every 8 species is about to go on the endangered species list on it or about to go off. 1 out of every 8. That's significant. So let me give you an example of one of them. Tree species. There are 65,000 tree species on this planet. 17,500 of them are about to go onto this list. That's 1/3 of all tree species you know. And I know if you look at that tree in the bottom corner, I know when you look at that tree, you're just thinking about a tree. You did not think about the one bird that only lives in that tree. You did not think about under the bark, all the amoebas and insects that live only in that tree. You did not think of the root system or what it holds together. You didn't think about the flowering trees that need the birds or the insects to be able to pollinate them. You didn't think about the safety that it gives to animals. So there's an ecosystem in a tree. It's a lot more than just a tree. And I'm going to give you another example of the baobab tree, which is in Africa. That's the one you could put 20 people could put their arms around. They lived about 1,500 to 2,000 years. And I'm going to toss something out that right now might be a little controversial. I saw something just the other day, so I haven't been able to check it out. But they lasted 1,500 to 2,000 years, and they're dying. Someone says they're not, but so far what I've read is they have been dying. And why? Because of the way the world is changing. And then in the United States, in Death Valley, which has been the hottest it's ever been in recorded history, there was a ranger talking about how oak trees are now dying. And they have lived in this environment for a very long time, thousands of years. And they said the beetles are eating them. And so my wife said, well, maybe the beetles' competitor has disappeared. And the ranger said, no, you can't think that way. See, the beetles and the oak trees have lived together for thousands of years. So we have things changing. We have to be able to adapt and evolve to them. So then we have, the ecosystems collapses, both human and animal. There's all different types of changes that are happening. So the Great Barrier Reef has been bleached. Coastal seawater rises in deltas and different parts of the world have been impacting the way people live. We have the sea urchins in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. They all died within 5 years. It was a bacteria that really formed because it got very hot and they killed off all the sea urchins. But what's important about it is they're like the garbage cleaners of the ocean. And when you lose them all, it's like not having garbage picked up where you are for some time. And it's happening all over the world. We even have that topsoil, 1/3 of the topsoil on this planet is degraded. And they expect by the year 2050, with the techniques we're using today, 90% of topsoil will be degraded. So how do we make that happen? Even one sea turtles, I didn't know this, I read about it, that the water in the ocean and going over the eggs determines if the sea turtle comes out to be a male or a female. Hotter, female, colder, male. And they're becoming more female. If you've ever been to the Bahamas and you want to order fish off the menu, you can look at these pictures. There's a lot of toxicity in that region. So the people fishing have to go further out. And so therefore they often fly in salmon. Salmon's not indigenous to the Bahamas. Morocco is having their farming collapse because of the heat and the temperature changes. Italy and Greece this year it was so hot that tourism had declined by 20%. 20% is huge if you made a profitability of 10% in a given year. We've seen population changes and conflicts around the world that are impacting how we're going to live in the future. So let's jump on to the next one. Displacement types: social, political, economic, religious, technological. There's all sorts of different types of displacement. Let me give you 2 examples. One of them is about temperature. Northern Africa will be above 50 C within probably the next 20, 25 years. Now that's over 110, 120 degrees. What happens when 230 million people live in that area? Well, they're not going to go sub-Saharan, that's a desert. They're going to want to move north to Europe. People move and migrate to be able to protect themselves. And then I'm going to share with you that a zinc manufacturer in Guangzhou, not picking on them as a country, it was just something I had learned while I was in Hong Kong. They had 1,200 employees and they ended up buying 12 robotic arms. And when they put these robotic arms in, they were made sinks, SINKS. So what happened was when they put in those 12, they fired 1,000 employees with the average time working there, which was 16 years. So people there work 30 years and people work 5 years. But what do you do next if you've been making sinks for 25 years? Computer software programming or artificial intelligence? Sure, there's changes and you can teach people and retool them. But the timeline is so quick and so powerful right now that displacement is happening. We've been going for centuries on an upswing where more and more people have a better quality of life. We're starting to see a down tip, and that's a challenge. Right now, just in the Sudan, there's 7.1 million people who are displaced because of the conflict. 7.1 million. Try to think about how many people that is. I mean, that's bigger than most major cities that you probably are familiar with. But we could also say that right now there's about 117 million people are displaced for all sorts of reasons. Displacement has always existed, but we want to be able to change the world. So how do we address that? Let's take the next one: unrest, social, political, economic, religious, technological. There's a whole series of unrests. And if you were to look at what's been happening in the world, we're seeing a lot of conflict. And they could be the streets of the UK, Brazil, USA. And we just saw South Korea with the martial law. Ethiopia, in their conflict, upwards of 600,000 people, civilians, have been killed. Syria, the numbers are just coming out. This has been on here for at least over 2 years. 650,000, some are saying 500,000 people have been killed. Then you have China with Taiwan, Philippines, USA. There's a conflict going on there. There's the Yemeni and the civil war in the Sudanese. Russia, Ukraine, Israel with Gaza, Lebanon, Iran. I mean, there's so many conflicts going on. And there's approximately, don't quote exactly on this, there's been about 18,000 recorded conflicts since the beginning of time. 18,000. And today on Earth, excluding the two world wars because they were a joint type of effort, there are more than 47 different conflicts going on. This is the most ever in recorded history. But that goes, we can go all the way down to the conflicts in regional areas, all the way up to the larger wars. And there's a lot more. And you can feel it. You know what's happening. So this one is a powerful one. I don't know if you know this, but we had to come up with a category, and the category it became explosive impact from things that humans do that are so over the top, they can't fit in one category like the others. So it's the deforestation in the rainforest, overfishing and trawling. Here's some data points, not picking on our society, they're feeding their people, but North Korea has 3,000 to 5,000 fishing vessels. The number one in the world is China. They have between 500,000 to 800,000 fishing vessels. I've seen different reports on that. We have large-scale agricultural challenges in the way we do our agriculture. We have fast fashion. But the one behind me is called solid waste and solid waste runoff. So we have all different types of waste. There's solid waste, industrial waste, agricultural waste, mining waste, medical waste, animal waste, radioactive waste, construction waste, demolition debris. There's gas. I mean, there's just all different types of waste. But this one is when the infrastructure can't take it. It's too overloaded, or it's bad ecosystem where it can't be filtered, which goes into the water. So let me help you understand a little bit about this. The United States, the Chesapeake Bay is estimated in 5 years you'll not be able to swim in it, not because of solid waste runoff, because of agriculture and industrial waste runoff. So the farming and the industry, those things go into the ocean, and it makes it, or into the Chesapeake Bay, so it can't thrive. So the United States dumps up to 12 billion gallons of municipal waste into the oceans and waterways every single day. 12 billion, the thing behind me that you're seeing over this shoulder, over the waterways and oceans. 12 billion. Just try to think of that for a moment. But let's try to be fair. We have 340 million people in the United States. We have in Europe about 530 to 720, depending on how you measure it. Just for the sake of argument, not picking on the country, but they're just geographies, easy to be able to reference because of the scale and size. So we take China with 12 billion, and we give India with 12 billion, with over 1 billion people in each. Just the four of those, if we're being kind across each one of them, because the data is probably not 100% accurate, but that's 48 billions of gallons of municipal waste into the runoff, or solid waste runoff, every single day. What does that mean? Well, I had this guy on a phone. His name is Howard Dryden. He is a phenomenal individual. We talked for over 2 hours, and we were having this conversation. At one point, he says, "David, your background's biology. You know that the lungs are not the rainforest, not the lungs of the planet." And I said, "No, it's not. It's an ecosystem. Ecosystems take care of themselves. My tree outside does not take care of Japan." Ecosystems work around their own metrics and their own processes. And he says, exactly. And then he tells me about the water. He's an expert in oceans. And he said he took 73 boats out onto the ocean, over a period of time, and measured the life in them. So normally what you do is you drop a bucket down about 3 feet or 1 meter. And he dropped it down 3 meters, or about 10 feet, and pulled it up, and he put what he got in the water under a microscope. And he said, "David, parts of the ocean are completely dead, not a living cell in them." Wow. I mean, oh my God, what does that mean? And then he said to me, "David, I'd like to tell you something. See, every day plankton goes up 300 meters, 1,000 feet, takes CO2, throws off oxygen, then goes down 300 meters, lets go of it, and because it's heavy enough at that point in the ocean, it drops to the ocean floor. And every day for millions of years, and every night, and every day, and every night, this has been happening." And he said, "David, the Earth's oxygen comes from the ocean. It's not the land that does it. It's 70% of the world's surface. It's not the CO2 that's going to kill us. It's our waterways and the production of plankton, and it's slowing down." So that interconnectedness of everything we do, So one of the solutions that is often thrown out in this whole ecosystem is that we have to reimagine the future. We have to work on reductionism. It will not work. We have to work on this overpopulation that we have. It's false. So let me go over them very quickly with you. The reductionism will not work. And I'm going to say that there's going to be another slide after this, which is going to kill me because I just changed it. Reductionism will not work, and it won't work because of the fundamental ways in which we look at the world. And I just added this slide, so you can imagine in my head what's going on right now. Reductionism won't work. I had a friend in China, in Xiamen, China, and we were having this conversation about all sorts of topics. It was a very, very good call. And at one point, the individual says to me, David, I've got to go take a shower. And I said, well, why don't we pick this up in 20 minutes? Well, I unleashed something I've never seen before. Like you would say I was on Skype. She took her hand back and she hit me that I still feel it on my cheek today. She said, don't you go telling me how I'm going to lead my life. I take a 20 to 50 minute shower every day and I will do so for the rest of my life. David, you've lived it this way and now it's our turn. And I went, whoa, what just happened here? And then I realized she wasn't talking about me. She was talking about society. See, they've read the magazines, they've seen the articles, they've seen the cars and the clothing, they've watched television shows and the movies. They want to have what they've seen. And who's the one who's going to go and tell them when it's 56 degrees C that they can't buy air conditioning units? Who's the one who's going to tell them that they can't have the clothing that they've seen? Who's the one? Are you going to do that? 62% of the world's population lives in this region. And so there we go. That's the slide. I just changed this, so I'm killing myself on this. But hey, that's what happens in the world, and I'm not redoing this. I think this is good enough for you. So look, there are other things here. 27,000 trees a day are cut down to make toilet paper. 52,000 trees are cut down to make paper towels. Are you going to stop using them? Absolutely not. You won't. And then we have the fact that it just won't work. And I'll give you an example of another individual. I was on the call with the person responsible for ESGs, SDGs, and Société Générale, which is in France. And we're having this amazing conversation. We're going back and forth about how the world is made up and what works. And at one point, I said, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And she said, sure. Again, she's the expert in ESGs and SDGs. And I said to her, you're an absolutely beautiful woman. I mean, the way you do your makeup and your hair, it's absolutely stunning. She's a little bit of thank you on that. And I say, are you going to give up putting on makeup every day? I mean, you do know that all those chemicals that come in and all those little containers create poisons all over the world. Are you going to give that up? I mean, knowing that every day women get up in their morning, they put these creams on their face, they wash off they get their face ready, they put on their makeup, their hair products, they go out for the day. At the end of the day, they wash that all off, take everything out of their hair, and they go to bed and sometimes put on cream. So you're going to give that up? And she looks down and looks up and she says, no. Oops, that other slide has got me. It's got me in my head. So then I'm talking to her about the clothing. And I said, I can see I'm in Hong Kong. You're wearing beautiful clothing. I like nice clothing. Are you going to give up fashion, the clothing shipped from around the world so that you can have a better life and dress the way you want? And I said, you do know that jeans take hundreds of liters of water. You do know that fast fashion is destroying entire ecosystems. Are you going to give that up? She puts down her head, looks up, and she says, no. I said, I'm living in Hong Kong. We have 2, 3, 4-hour dinners with our French friends. Are you going to give up fast food, food flown in from around the world so that you can have your meals with your family and your friends? She puts down her head and looks up and she says, no. And I said, so I guess my big question is this. If you, knowing better and have the means to do so, won't do it, how does 72 to 79% of the world's population do this if you won't? She puts down her head, looks up and she says, I don't know. I don't know. See, our world is made of the things that we live in, and we don't even know what's going on. The founder of Siri, he said to me one day, we were talking at a conference, he said, David, every time you take a single photograph and put it onto social media, it's the equivalent of 3 20-watt light bulbs running for an hour. 3 20-watt light bulbs running for an hour. That's incredible. So every time you post or every time you're using it for any purposes, you have to charge your phone, charge the phones of the people who receive it. You have to have the communication systems, the hubs. You have to have the servers. And he said that doesn't include storage. When you go out and you buy an iPhone or you buy a phone, do you end up, did you realize that it takes 50 tons of material to make one iPhone? 50 tons? And that's just from not one quarry. That's from multiple quarries around the world. Are you going to give that up? And then we have this delusion that we have world's overpopulated. No, it's not. We are not overpopulated at all. And what that means is that the reason we're not overpopulated is if we took every single person shoulder to shoulder and back to back and put them together, they would fit on Manhattan Island. I mean, if you've been on a plane, you've seen over vast areas of the world that we don't touch. So we have this belief that we would be able to, our world is overflowing. But if we were to give everybody a square yard or a square meter, it would still be a little bit bigger than a city. And if we were say Cyprus would be the size. But even if we give them the home, they're still not going to fill up the entire world. We don't have a challenge with the number of people on this planet. Now, some of you might be saying we need to build the box with a roof and a door. You don't need to go to the moon. We should do it on Earth. I don't know if you know that there has been experiments with this. One of them is called Biosphere 2. They put $200 million into it. It was a complete failure. They constructed this and tried to live a year on Earth. It ended up being a disaster, and you didn't even hear about it. See, we need things that people can hear about and understand. And getting that box with the roof and a door on the moon, the sipping the coffee, the figuring out that we have a new ecosystem when we live within Earth is how we change the future. So, humans have difficulty understanding the complexity of our actions in the universe. We have difficulty with complexity. It's not something that we easily can get our mind around. And I want you to rethink that Project Moonhut is actually tying together a lot of those pieces in a way that you might not understand today. That's okay. We're moving forward with amazing people. Again, hopefully you're one of them. And we are where we are based upon an interconnected set of conditions that have happened over centuries. It's not just one solution. And our solution has to be counterintuitive. It's got to combine humanistic concerns as well as technological advancements. That's what we're tying together. So let me bring you through a time-lapse series, and maybe you'll get this. When we started the project, you could almost picture it as we were connected, but we had these pockets of innovation focused on the directive that we have. And since we've been working together, we've been connecting those efforts. So those are the blue lines between one another. But if you look at those pink lines, those are the innovations turning back on Earth. Individuals on our team are already using things on Earth that they wouldn't have learned otherwise without Project Moonhut. But then we make it vibrate even more. We get the 8 people on the moon and we ignite a whole set of innovations back on Earth. We've made it that 4-minute mile. We've created more opportunities for individuals. We break it over and over again, and the innovations are fastly vibrating on this planet. And then we develop a Earth ecosystem. We sell something to the moon and the moon to the Earth, and we reshape how we think. And then the pink lines keep on happening. And then there's the Earth economy, dynamic and connected, all together. We get to a point where we brought it together and the possibilities are endless. You can even see here there are pinks happening on the moon. So innovations are happening on Earth and innovations directly onto the moon, and we end up creating Mirth, the world where we live in and a future for humanity, for tomorrow. Now, when we shared this story with Pierce, who is a former military special forces individual, and we were done, Pierce said, my body was changing as I heard the story. It sounded so amazing that these things were happening. And what was interesting, and he said, David, I don't know if you know what I do, but what I do is I take young kids and veterans and try to help them to see a new future. And in essence, I think what's happening, David, is what I try to do for one child, Project Moonhut's trying to do for the entire world. Hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it sounds like good model to follow. So we need the right people. We need well-defined plans we're working on to transcend this whole talk of scarcity and abundance. Individuals who use that as a reference are more or less saying there's people who have it and people who don't. But what if we can change that? What if we fuel a new era that has ingenuity and transformation of the actions that we're engaged in? What if instead of the fourth industrial revolution to the fifth industrial revolution, which is just faster computers and faster speed and more technology, what if we usher in the age of infinite? infinite possibilities and infinite resources by bringing mirth together. That's the next age that we're entering into. And that is our small project. That's what we've been working on. Now, I can guarantee you some of you have questions. We need to connect for you to ask those questions. We'd love to hear from you. That would be amazing. But you're probably asking, if you, like many people are, is how do you get involved? We work very differently. As a nonprofit, I learned a long time ago that everybody works for a fee. No one works for free. See, in a for-profit, you can give somebody money and they can go out and they'll do it for you. But in a nonprofit, you really have to get people who are here for a purpose, and you have to find that intrinsic value. It's a much harder leading experience because you don't have the same levers to pull. And we also realized that, look, in most organizations, and not picking on them, just use an example, if you donated money to a nonprofit, for example, Solving for Cancer, you're never going to solve or help a patient yourself. Somebody else will. Or save the whales. Somebody else is going to go out and save whales. Project Moonhut's very different. So let me share with you that we are tying together talent, networks, and capital in that order. We're looking for talent. If you get talent, you get networks. You heard about a ton of people that are involved in the project, and they're all working. We're not just sitting around professing to say we're going to do something. We are working. And that brings the capital. So there are many different ways you can get involved with Project Moonhut. Let me break them down for you. There are others, but these are the core. In the talent side, contribute your products from your company. Help us to do the things that we need. Microsoft gives us 100 seats on Teams. There's all sorts of products. Make.com just gave us the ability to do the automation sequences. We have people who are donating their services. We have an individual who's doing the podcast editing out of Israel and cleaning that up. We have individuals out of Morocco working on art design or the art project. We have individuals all over the world helping us in different capacities, and it's fantastic. And they've been with us for a long time. So you could bring your skill set. Maybe you don't know anything we're doing, but you know how to do project management, or you know how to do engineering, or you can help us with something that has to do with design. You bring your skill set. Maybe it's not a product or service. Then you have the networks. Help us to present at your next event. We want to speak in front of those philanthropic groups. We want to reach out to individuals around the world, tell the story. Share this video with individuals so that they can get it. Link us to your networks so that we're finding the right networks. Help us to find individuals. We have individuals who are on our team. The sole thing that they do is introduce us to people. That happens all the time, whether it be from Singapore or Hong Kong or India. We're constantly getting from Slovenia, from Slovakia, you just name it. People are sending people all the time our way. Listen to our podcast. Learn something about the future. On the capital side, you could donate to our 501c3. We're looking to set up in multiple areas around the world, including we're working on right now, potentially Mexico, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, China. We want to be set up in Dubai, in India, in Israel, in Europe, and we have a bunch of designated places there. All over the world. So you can donate to the foundation. You can donate and invest. You can do both. Donate some and invest in some of our entities. Invest in an entity, the work that we're working on in one's particular area, such as the platform or Beyond Earth. You can pick that. Or you can invest in all the things that we're working on. And Project Moonhut brings the world together in a way that's never been done before. Put aside all the challenges you have. There are amazing people worldwide. And I often get questions, will you work with somebody from that country? And I've possibly been there. There are amazing people from every part of the world, and we're looking to find them. And hopefully you'll be one of them. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for listening. You can go to our website by hitting the QR code. You can also take a second, you can pause it, and you can donate. And we take all different types of currency around the world. So that said, I'm David Goldsmith. Appreciate you spending the time listening from the bottom of our heart. So thank you. Looking forward to meeting you.